This full moon lunar eclipse at 15 degrees of Pisces conjunct the North Node is no ordinary lunation. It's a soulful portal, eclipse portal, amplifying spiritual growth, intuitive knowing, and emotional release. The moon's conjunction to the North Node says, what you're releasing is part of your divine evolution. Even if it feels murky, uncertain, or bittersweet, it is divinely timed. Welcome to Feed Your Wild, a soul space for intuitive healers, visionary practitioners, light workers, and mystics at the threshold of transformation. I'm Vanessa Rodriguez, Akashic Channel, your intuitive guide and clinically trained healer devoted to bringing you closer to your purpose, reclaim your gifts, and walk your sovereign path. Here, we blend rooted wisdom and spirit-led insight to support your personal healing, spiritual leadership, and the work only you can do. Pisces, let's take a look at this Pisces lunar eclipse happening at September 7th, 2025. The spiritual pulse of this eclipse, as multiple astrologers have noted, is Pisces equals completion and compassion. This eclipse is a deep culmination moment. It brings evolution through endings, karmic closures, and dissolving of old energetic entanglements, and yet it simultaneously initiates a kind of ascent. The North Node in Pisces pulls you towards spiritual alignment, spiritual expansion, and new visioning, and it's less about action. That's more of the Virgo end of things here, and this is more about receiving messages, trusting the void that we are in and the unraveling. On a personal level, I've been supporting quite a few folks intuitively and guiding their path, and a lot are saying how they're feeling in this void-like space and how uncomfortable it is. So part of this lunation and this eclipse season, I feel, is really inviting us to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, get comfortable with the void space and what that actually invites us into, which is an ascent into deeper alignment and allowing the unraveling to occur. This is also the second of 3 Pisces lunar eclipses from 2024 to 2026, a rare karmic cycle for those with planets in mutable signs. So that's Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, Sagittarius, from 10 degrees to 20 degrees. The story here is unfolding in layers, and this is really your midpoint wake up, so to speak, and release point. We have Virgo on the other side here. Virgo is balancing. That earthy, mercurial nature of Virgo is asking us to look at our life in a very practical way. And yes, the minutia of it, the actions and the mental space, because Virgo being a highly mental sign as well, ruled by Mercury. And we're looking at the Sun, Mercury, and the South Node here, all like the Sun sandwiched between the South Node and Mercury. So with this, we're being asked to hold both the sacred and the practical. This eclipse is not just a dreamy sort of float away energy. It brings a containment. It brings a structure, as we're going to see with Saturn, and with Virgo at play, it's also calling us to look at where our routines, our habits, and mental loops have been maybe too small for who we are becoming. So it's asking us to question what is no longer working in our daily rhythms, in our health practices and routines, or our service work, all of those things that Virgo is really connected with. And it's inviting discernment over escapism. Can you be present with, instead of falling into perfectionism, which can be, the shadowy end of Virgo, can we be fully present with what is? This is a polarity. Pisces wants transcendence, Virgo wants order. But together they offer a path to healing, the split that is between your mystical self and your embodied self. Yes, there's going to be emotional waves. And so there is this surrendering that I think we are also being invited into. This eclipse could feel big, it could feel messy, but ultimately, I feel, as we're going to touch on with Jupiter's blessing, I feel like it's going to feel beautiful too. Yes, emotional, but it's going to feel like we're supported in this. So you might feel like you're in between timelines or versions of yourself. And that's because Saturn is at the 29th degree of Pisces. Saturn has moved from Aries back into Pisces for this last round. And, this is really like going through a series of exams, and Saturn is bringing us to the final exam. We're at the end of this, and we're kind of going back to review what it is that we put down. Have we said the right thing? Are we on the right track here? And I feel that Saturn in this way in Pisces is anchoring this eclipse with karmic gravity, but also structure. Like I said, it's that final exam energy. So what patterns are you truly ready to release? Where have you over-identified with sacrifice, confusion, or fear? Neptune in Aries and the minor grand trine that's happening, where we have Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune, and they're all pointing to Neptune in Aries, Neptune being the modern ruler of Pisces, so this particular lunation and eclipse. This cosmic grand trine, this minor grand trine, is offering this arrow toward the future through Neptune, through Pisces, that Piscean area of your chart, that area of your life, even if it's not visible yet. Because of course, Neptune is not about full clarity. There can be an illusion, disillusionment, there can be a nebulousness, a cloudiness nature with Neptune and with Pisces. But what I'm getting is that we don't have to see. We don't have to see yet. And very often it's when we're in the void, when we're in maybe even disorientation, that we have to drop into our innate compass, our feeling sense, our intuition, which will guide us way better than what our mind really can, and through our perceived reality. Because remember, perception, everything revolves around perception. Our reality is really based on our perception. So when we can shift our perception, we shift our reality. We want to stay also connected to what you feel to be true. So not what is logical, not just what is logical. Of course, don't throw all logic out the window. But sometimes, again, we may hold ourselves back based off of a perception that seems logical, but may not be actually anchored into a soul truth. And we're going to feel that soul truth. We're not going to know it with our mind necessarily until we've actually tuned into it and accepted it. So Jupiter in Cancer here is trining this moon and trining Saturn. And remember, Jupiter is the ruler, the traditional ruler of Pisces. So we have Neptune at play here, and we also have Jupiter, the traditional ruler of Pisces, playing a huge role here. And Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, can do so many beautiful things in Cancer because Jupiter has all of their resources and support in Cancer, loves being in Cancer, and is blessing this moon and Saturn in Pisces with a trine, with a harmonious aspect of the trine. So Jupiter and Saturn trining this moon, Jupiter in Cancer trining this moon and trining Saturn in Pisces brings healing and insight from our past, from our childhood, and from our intuition, Cancer being a highly intuitive sign and sensitive sign, from our feeling sense. And past, when we look at past, especially around family and childhood and emotional nourishment, all things that Cancer is really connected to. You might finally see the pattern that has been running in the background since you were little. And now be ready to do things differently because you're ready to be different. So some key themes here and soul invitations related to this eclipse and lunation is emotional detox. Let the tears run. Water is so healing here. Water being very connected, very much connected with Pisces, a water sign, with Cancer, a water sign. Tears, the living waters of our bodies, are so incredibly important, and they hold so much. And we are made up mostly of water, and we're only touching the surface of the power of water as it relates to ourselves, who we are, and reality. And so allowing the tears to flow is going to be incredibly supportive for release work, which is what we are being asked to do with this eclipse. Also, dreams, the dream time, cultivating that dream space and practice so that you can work with your dreams, and memories, opening up and allowing the flood of memories that want to come through, that want to surface, and maybe going back down memory lane if that feels right for you. It's all sacred. It's all really welcomed with this lunation. With this particular eclipse and season, I feel that we are moving from disillusionment. So taking a look at certain areas of your life, especially the Pisces and the Virgo areas of your life, perhaps maybe also the Cancer area of your life. Where have you maybe felt disillusioned or disillusionment come up within those areas in your life? And we're moving from disillusionment to divine clarity as perhaps slowly, really slowly, the veils lift and truth emerges. There's release here. We want to release any sense of performance, like we are performing a version of ourselves that is not actually aligned with who we are anymore. We want to release perfectionism, a la Virgo. And also we want to release any kind of a bypassing, spiritual bypassing, which can often happen too when we are sort of in that nebulous dissolution space as it pertains to our spiritual landscape, our life. So we want to lean into intuitive trust and our emotions. Even if you don't know the how quite yet, I want you to cultivate that trust. Cultivating that trust requires practice. We have to practice tuning into our intuition and looking at the evidence as we do that shows us the evidence, the proof that we need that helps enhance our trust and build our trust muscle. So again, be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with your nervous system. With Pisces is all about compassion. Deep compassion. When it comes to the Pisces Virgo axis, both of those are highly sensitive signs in different ways. So with Virgo, we see that with the nervous system and the mental stimulation and the gut feeling sense, the gut intuition sense, that is highly sensitive, with that connection with Mercury as a channel and communicator, but also so much with the gut. And with Pisces, it has much more to do with the feeling sense, the spiritual knowing, and the intuition. So working with both of these, and the interface between the two is the nervous system. So gentle with your nervous system, support and nourish your nervous system, and bring in restorative and regulation practices that are going to help you, like sleep, grounding, and eating foods that are helping to ground and support you. One thing that is notable about this particular lunation is that conjunct the sun, so right next to, in between the sun and the south node, we have the asteroid Pandora. This is very interesting because Pandora, we know from Pandora's box, where she opened the box and released and unleashed chaos within the universe. So this sounds like, well, that doesn't sound so great. But here's the thing. The very last thing that was left in the box after the release of that was hope. And so there's something here around, and I think it's so interesting also that unleashing and the releasing is in between the sun and the south node here in Virgo. we may have experienced and felt a lot of chaos in that particular part of our chart, of our life. And there's something here around coming back home to the fact that there is still hope available to us. I feel definitely that we can attune to this on a global scale. We see so much chaos, horrific things that are happening in the world on a global stage, and we may feel a bit helpless around it as well. And I'm not one to like whitewash or bypass or any of that kind of stuff, but what I do believe in my heart of hearts is that in order to shift reality in this state of the world and to cultivate a more beautiful world we know to be true, we have to remember that hope is always available to us. Now, when it comes to the medical astrology and herbal astrology side of things, when we look at Pisces, Pisces is a water sign, of course, and is mutable. The mode is mutable, meaning that Pisces is changeable, adaptable, flexible. With Pisces in particular, it's very much unstructured. The boundaries have dissolved. There's unity consciousness, and compassion is spilled forth in that way through an understanding, a deep understanding, an innate knowing of that universal and unity consciousness experience. So one of the things that we see that I actually see reflected in people that I work with, like students and those that I serve, those who tend toward having proclivities around animal communication, like they just have these innate gifts of being able to communicate cross species. Many of them have some strong Piscean energy. So maybe sun, moon, rising sign, maybe they've got like a stellium in Pisces. And I find that with those folks, there is a connection, an innate connection and understanding and ability to communicate with those of a different species, right? And so not just humans, but with others, and also not just animals, but it very much can be with beings that are not embodied. So spiritual beings and entities and angels and such, which is one of the reasons why we see Pisces being such a highly intuitive and spiritual sign too. So Pisces as a water sign and mutability is part of their like adaptability and changeability. Pisces is also ruled, as I mentioned, by Jupiter, which is the traditional ruler, and then Neptune, which is the modern ruler. When it comes to the areas of the body that are most connected with Pisces, we see the feet and the toes. So the very last, the final, the most bottom part of the physical body, where we see Aries, which is like the first sign of the zodiacal wheel, being connected with the head. We see Pisces being the final, the last sign of the zodiacal wheel, being connected with the feet and the toes. But we also see Pisces being connected in with the fluids of the body fluids, the living waters. So the synovial fluid, mucus, blood, lymph, lymphatic system, glandular secretions, and digestive secretions, endocrine secretions, like the glandular and endocrine systems in general. Also the ability of tissues and the system, the body, to relax, that sleep, and to dream. We also see the pineal gland being connected in with Pisces as well. When we look at the tissue states, and this is through the energetic system of traditional Western herbalism, the tissue states that are most connected with an imbalanced or weakened Pisces is damp relaxation. So damp being too much water, and relaxation, which can happen when there's too much water. So there's too much laxity in the tissues. There's not enough tonification with that. So putting those together, what are some of the things that we might see in terms of imbalances and dis-ease? Well, we could see things that come up when there is too much dampness, when there is too much relaxation. an excess of fluids. We might see colds, so things that are cold and moist. Influenza, colds that come through, especially like very mucousy, nasally colds, or like a lot of mucus in the lungs. We might see tuberculosis and any kind of excess mucus, maybe even with allergies and discharge, runny noses, watery eyes, wet coughs, lung sensitivity in that way. And then also sensitivity, period. So I'd mentioned Pisces being a highly sensitive sign, so we see any kind of excess or overdeveloped sensitivity happening here too. And when we have that relaxation and laxity, we lose that sense of vitality. So we could see that there might be some low vitality with an imbalanced Pisces. And in that way, the immune system might be low or suppressed, and they can feel sick often. So the other thing that we see in terms of the waters when there is imbalance is swelling. So lymphatic swelling in the body, wherever we might have the nodes. We can also see any kind of challenges or issues or diseases with the lymph, and then also the systems that I named earlier, the endocrine and the glandular system. And that may include some what we might perceive as autoimmune disorders and diseases. Overgrowth can also happen here when there's too much water and too much moisture and dampness. So we can see potential fungal overgrowth and disease, and microbial and viral overgrowth and diseases. Now, if you're looking at it through, for example, the lens of German New Medicine, then you might see that as well. The fungal overgrowth and bacterial overgrowth, microflora, might actually be a part of the healing response and not necessarily in response to the environmental growth because of the excess water and fluids. And I would say that it actually is all part of the same wheel, right? It's all part of the same picture, because when we have that overgrowth, even if it's indicative of a healing phase, then we still know that there has been an imbalance here. And there is typically the waters are at play in some way. We can also see those sensitivities extend into the environmental and chemical landscape and sensitivities there. So the allergies and sensitivities to food, to environmental pollutants or toxins, or even innocuous things that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be sensitive to or allergic to. With an imbalanced Pisces, I see a definite hypersensitivity to some of these things. And very often it seems more related actually to a sensitivity and an overwhelm or overstimulation and overload of things that are more on the subtle plane. So spiritual and energetic toxins that then accumulate and produce sort of this sense of overload to the system. So then that's when the bucket of everything else, when it starts to fall in, even an innocuous thing like, if like, for example, you were never allergic to pollen before, although pollen obviously is a very common allergen, then all of a sudden you are. Or maybe it's to the sun or to sand or things that like aren't typically, those are very rare, having allergies to those or sensitivities to those. And yet it becomes part of your profile of what you're sensitive to because of this overload that you have on a more subtle plane, a subtle level. And with all of that overload and the sensitivity and the laxity, we could see chronic fatigue happening for my Pisces folks too. We can also throw in the feet here. So any issues having to do with the feet, maybe that's like athlete's foot, any kind of fungal stuff going on, bunions, gout, other kind of infections, ingrown toenails, just random stuff with the feet may have to do with the Pisces imbalance. Also swelling, so water retention around the feet and swelling too. Now, of course, not always, but these are just some of the things that we may see according to medical astrology. Lastly, especially with the Neptunian thing at play here, we can see potential addiction and abuse of chemicals and drugs here. Poison is also something that we see with Neptune when it's like not a good thing, right? When we see a complete imbalance or toxicity that's coming in through Neptune or Pisces, then we can see that manifest as some sort of like chemical poisoning or an addiction and drug abuse. Lastly, I would say that we might also see things happening where our sense of individuality and who we are begins to dissolve. So this would be forgetfulness in its most innocuous and mild expression, but then we can also see neurodegenerative stuff going on and Alzheimer's as an example, or hallucinations that also may play out. So of course, I don't want you to think, oh my gosh, like this moon and I have a lot of Pisces and this is going to happen to me. Of course not. But what I am saying is that these are some things that have been demonstrated and highlighted when there is severe imbalance, and there's like a lot of Piscean imbalance going on here. Now, I'd mentioned one of these great gifts of Pisces, one of the great gifts of Pisces is that unity consciousness, right? That their ability to not even like move beyond, but completely dissolve the boundaries and separateness, which results in great and deep compassion for all, but also can be a really big challenge for setting up boundaries for their own well-being. So this could be boundaries within relationships. This could be psychic and intuitive and spiritual boundaries, energy boundaries. I talk about energetic sovereignty in another episode if you want to tune into that. And so what can happen is that there's an abundance and continuously feeling overwhelmed by input, by spiritual, intuitive, and energetic input. And while this absolutely can be supportive when it is measured, it can be very challenging for the person to experience. So Pisces people really need to support their vitality, to cultivate the boundaries that are going to be really supportive for them, to build in that structure and containment for their living waters, for their expansive ability to care and to love, and to root down and ground as much as possible, because, and I can attest to this too without having a ton of earth in my own chart, engaging with your physical form as much as you can is going to only enhance your gifts and your soul's experience and growth in this life. So really helping, especially the living waters in your body, the fluids in the body, including your blood, your lymph, the mucus, really making sure that you're speaking to yourself, that internal dialogue, and speaking to those living waters within you in a way that is loving and intentional. And I think that itself is so powerful, because when you can cultivate and build that relationship within yourself and with the waters within you, it's a game changer. So one of the things that I see in terms of the imbalances is experiencing poor circulation in that lowered immunity. So again, really supporting, bringing in warmth and structure and support for your body, for your immune system. Very similar to Aquarius. Aquarius, I have Aquarius moon, so I totally get this. Pisces need to be conscious of the pollutants in our environment, environmental, chemical, and psychic, as it relates to what you surround yourself. I call this our sacred ecology. That's one of the reasons why the sacred ecology is such a core part of my body of work for years and years, because I myself, as a very watery being and having my Aquarius moon, I experienced toxicity and overwhelm, that overload of pollutants that were on all planes part of my environment and my ecology. My environment as it related to my mental environment and ecology, my spiritual ecology, my physical ecology, and the environment that I was immersed in, and the mental, the emotional. So looking at that as well as the chemical within your environment, because Pisces in general is very sensitive to that. Before we get into the herbal allies that are supportive for us, I want to invite you, if you haven't already done so, to take my free quiz. Because I'm sure right by now you're probably tuning in and you're like, I may not have a lot of Pisces in my chart, but I wonder what gifts I have that are innate. And yes, looking at our astrology is absolutely one way that we can do that. And that's one way that I teach as well. But I have a free quiz that taps into your intuitive healer archetype. And by connecting in with this primary archetype, then you will know what innate gifts are already within you that are ready to be awakened, or maybe already have, but just needing some extra belief and support behind them. So if you're interested in learning about which intuitive healer archetype is connected with you, then go to wildlyrooted.com/quiz. It's a free quiz that is maybe a couple minutes long. And by the end, you will have a complete profile and a written report of who your intuitive healer archetype is, and what are the innate gifts, the spiritual gifts, the challenges that I see, some practical steps that you can take to support yourself, as well as allies that are available to you. wildlyrooted.com/quiz. Remedies, possible remedies for a weakened or imbalanced Pisces. So when we are looking at that, having said everything that we have up until now, we can already guess what might be really supportive for Pisces. Number one, when we're looking at the body and the immune system, of course, immunomodulating herbs and foods and immunostimulating herbs and foods may be supportive. Now, with that, there's a caveat. It's always to make sure you're working with somebody who can tailor and customize based off of your unique constitution. Because yes, you may have strong Pisces in your chart, your sun, moon, rising, but there's other stuff going on. So I don't want you to get into a situation where you're just taking all of this and applying it without actually looking at who you are, what your constitution is. Do you run hot? Do you run dry? Do you run cold? Do you have a particular kind of autoimmune disorder that immunomodulating or stimulating might throw you into an imbalance? So we just, again, want to make sure that we're working with people who know what they're doing with that and what we're looking for. And adaptogens as well can be really supportive for Pisces. But again, there is so many different adaptogens, so we want to make sure we are tailoring it to the specific person. Now, warming herbs in general can help to dry out excess dampness, excess water and moisture that might be at play with an imbalanced Pisces. And in that way, those warming and even hot herbs can be supportive. What I have found is that Pisces is generally sensitive. So in all different ways that we spoke of, but especially physically, Pisces can be highly sensitive as it pertains to dosage and the types of remedies that you bring in. So don't underestimate gentle remedies and medicines here, such as flower essences, gem essences, and light touch, massage, reflexology, anything with the feet, because Pisces also ruling the feet. Anything with massage with the feet or the lymphatic system, lymphatic drainage massage, even energy, prayer, and energy healing, meditation can be really supportive. And making sure that you are always including an intuitive approach to your remedies and to foods in diet. I find that for Pisces folk, for everybody, there isn't any one particular diet that's great for everyone. But what I have found working with Pisces folk is that they can get incredibly sensitive, which may look like multiple food allergies that just continue to increase. But what it actually is an overstimulation or overabundance of input. And so this is where getting down to basics and building back up your reserves, your nervous system, your own, and cultivating energetic sovereignty, clearing things can be really helpful to begin to eliminate some of these allergies that can look like from a more like physiological, when you're doing testing, can look like it's coming from general inflammation or systemic inflammation, but is actually more rooted in an energetic sensitivity plane. So, and with that, plenty of sleep for my Pisces folk. Sleep and dream time is medicine, really, really deep medicine. So don't underestimate the powers of that in our healing journey. Now, when it comes to herbs, there are a few different that we can bring in, and that many of them have the effect of what we are trying to achieve based off of what I just mentioned, the various types of remedies. So one of the class of foods and herbs that I find really supportive for Pisces when we even think about our waters is connecting in with plant allies and algae that are literally intelligences that work with the water. So any kind of seafood, sea weeds, bladderwrack, kelp are really great. Irish moss. I did an entire podcast episode in one of the Pisces moons back in the day on Irish moss. And the algae such as chlorella can be really helpful here. We also want to tend to the lymphatic system. So any herbs such as cleavers and calendula can be really helpful in cleaning up those waters, so to speak. Now, one of the other things that I find is the warming herbs, as I'd mentioned before. So ocotillo, angelica, ginger, that can bring that warmth and vitality and movement and get things moving can be really helpful. And things that can be supportive for the immune system, such as elder. One thing that I have noted with Pisces is that, again, there's something really valuable with working with plants that have this innate, which you could argue all of them do, but some have more of an affinity and innate relationship even within their environment with water. So I had mentioned some of the sea plants before and those being really beautiful, but another one that comes through that is connected as a remedy herb for Pisces is willow, Salix alba. And what's interesting is that recently I had a call inside of my private community, and we get to do these really fabulous healing exchanges. It's for intuitive healers, mystics, and light workers, practitioners. And we get to exchange our gifts. And so I was doing this with a small group that I was leading. And one of the ladies did a reading for me. And my question was around something that had to do with my son. And what she brought forward was attuning to specific flower essences that would be supportive in response to my inquiry. And what came through was willow. And what's so fascinating, aside from like how perfect it was for my inquiry in my particular situation, but my son and I have an affinity for water and for willow. And willow was a plant that I got to know while I was living in Oregon because willow was everywhere, and learning to work with willow. And so one particular example of this was I did a workshop where I wove a basket using willow. And being able to physically work with and connect with the plant ally in that way, and weaving is such a meditative practice to begin with. I learned so much from willow by doing that. But even just looking at the act of taking willow, parts of willow and the stems, and submerging them in water so that they have this flexibility and adaptability and this resilience. And then you're able to use that to weave, literally weave, a basket, a vessel, and container that then when dried becomes hardened and so strong and can hold so much. And that is one of the things that I see is really supportive for Pisces, is utilizing the gifts of the water, working with that adaptability and the purity to build structure, to build a foundation and strength. Now, when we look at willow essence, some of the positive qualities that we see with that, if willow essence were a person, right? The positive qualities would be the ability to accept the things in life that maybe are challenging, the adaptability and flexibility to see from all perspectives and to forgive and to take responsibility for your own life situation, ultimately flowing with life. So it's this kind of adaptability and flexibility. When we see indications of a need for or a willow essence, this can be where there's patterns of feeling resentful, resistance to taking that responsibility for our actions, and being inflexible, ultimately, bitter, feeling that life is unfair and having victim consciousness, that you're a victim of life. So not fully taking ownership of the things that you played a role in it, because we are co-creators of our life experience. Now, that's not to say that everything that's bad that happened in our lives or to us is our fault. That's not what this is saying. This is saying, though, stepping out of victim consciousness and out of rigidity that is holding you in a pattern of an inability to let go and receive and forgive. So this is where, when we have the unawareness that our thoughts create our reality. When I touched on the power of our thoughts and speaking to the waters, the living waters in our own body, and how thought, according to some now that's coming out, if you haven't heard this already, that thoughts are actually a state, one of the states of water. Wrap your mind around that. How beautiful it is to align our thoughts with the truth of who we are versus a story or program that is running that is not serving us. So Willow is able to help assist and stimulate that level of mental receptivity and flexibility that we need in order to cultivate resilience. And it helps us to move through our resistance to forgiving, to consciously creating our lives through the power of our thoughts. So this is a really beautiful one for Pisces, and one that was brought to my awareness in my own life literally just the other day, right before I was going to record this for you. And so, of course, if you're in this world, you know that these allies and these messengers come through right at the exact moment they need to deliver the message. And I felt like this was a big one to deliver today for this eclipse. So if you are one to tend to hold on to things, to tend to hold on to bitterness, resentment, and just have a hard time letting go or accepting certain things in your life, I encourage you to meet with Willow, connect with the spirit of Willow, perhaps work with a Willow essence, and see what happens. Get curious without expectation or attachment to outcome. Again, we don't want to be rigid in our thinking or way of being, but allowing the medicine of Willow to release some of these dammed up negative or lower vibration and heavier emotions and thoughts so that they can be released from our being in our body. What I tend to see is that on a physical level, this can manifest as literal rigidity. So stiffness in the joints, arthritic complaints or rheumatism. We could see that. I've seen it so much with people who have an especially hard time with letting go. And very often it's directed at themselves. It's self-directed. So when I'm talking about forgiveness and letting go, yes, it may have to do with somebody else or a particular situation, but most often for people who are holding on chronically, it's more about themselves. So cultivating a softness and a kind of self-compassion that Pisces is so great at doing for others, and bringing that in for yourself to liberate some of these aspects that could be holding you in pain and in rigidity. Willow, white willow in particular, if you weren't familiar, is actually an herbal precursor to aspirin. And what do we use aspirin for? To relieve pain, especially for all the things that I just mentioned. And so willow has that innate capacity energetically to do that. Willow has a direct connection with the waters by growing near waters, and there's a relationship there that is inherent and an affinity that you can bring to support your own waters as well. And the Bach flower essence remedy of willow is actually using the flower of willow, and the flower of willow is known to bounce back after being injured or being broken. And so that sort of bouncing back or springing back, making a comeback, is a signature for the willow essence. I also love to consult the Herbal Astrology Oracle deck by Adriana Ayales, and she has Anima Mundi Herbals, an apothecary online. And I love this deck because she weaves in Astro herbalism as well, and that's what I look at primarily. So I use this as an added support for our moon musings, and I ask, what ally here wants to come through in support of this particular cycle? So this Pisces lunar eclipse cycle and phase. And what came through was Comfrey, card number 32. And Comfrey is connected with the term completion in her book. It's card number 32, and the ruler of Comfrey is Saturn. So of course we want to look at Saturn and Saturn's role here. Now, what's so great, and what I had mentioned earlier, is that Saturn is now retrograde, has come back to Pisces from entering Aries, dipping into Aries, and then coming back to Pisces to sort of, do this last recheck of all the things in our Pisces house when we look at the Pisces area of our chart. But this time, it feels different because the ruler of Pisces, which is Jupiter, is exalted in Cancer and making a trine to this lunation. Now, the cool thing here is Pisces is ruled by Jupiter. That's the traditional ruler of Pisces. And Jupiter is currently exalted in Cancer and making a trine to Saturn, who is in Pisces, ruled by Jupiter. Previously, there was a period where Jupiter was in Gemini, and Jupiter was in detriment in Gemini and making a square to Saturn. And that felt like Saturn was a bit under-resourced. There's tension there. It was kind of a struggle. This time, though, he is supported by an exalted Jupiter, one of our great benefics, who is making a positive aspect, a trine, a harmonious aspect to Saturn. So this time around, coming back into Pisces, Saturn is fully resourced, Saturn is uplifted, and Saturn is supported by Jupiter. This is going to give us the opportunity to tie up loose ends. When I talked about that exam that we're taking, we're going back and it feels good. We are going over all of the things that we did already in our Pisces house, but this time we're getting a little bit of a blessing. And we're going to feel much more ease around that in that particular area of our chart in our life. We will have an opportunity to close out that chapter and to cultivate a greater sense of clarity that maybe we didn't have before. And even if things had felt hard, I feel like now we're getting that support to move through in a way that we actually see the blessings, we see the higher timeline, and we have the resources to step onto that timeline this time around. Coming back now to Adriana's beautiful Herbal astrology book and Comfrey, ruled by Saturn. She says, completion, Comfrey is connected to achievement, completion of a cycle, success, closure, completion of long journey, wholeness, and mending. And I just think about that mending with Willow and making that basket, and how what may have felt really challenging before and broken, now we are resourced and we can make something beautiful out of that. Comfrey is known to support the structure of the body, the bones and the skin, the barriers, and the foundation of our physical being. Comfrey stimulates healing on a cellular level and promotes systemic healing in that way in connection with the skin and the musculoskeletal system. And I'll read this last piece. Like Saturn, Comfrey grounds us and teaches lessons within karmic inheritance, supporting us as we endure through hardships. Draw upon Comfrey's power to mend and find wholeness in lessons and patterns that need closure. For some small action items that you can incorporate this season, make sure you're hydrating yourself with really good quality living water, if possible, from springs or high quality filtered water, bringing in those minerals as needed, and speaking to the living waters within your own body as well as outside of your body for support, and support your lymphatic flow and system with movement or perhaps some herbal allies. Nurture your feet, bring in that reflexology, or ask a loved one or friend to give you a foot massage. And grounding rituals are your best friend. I'm looking at you, Pisces. In the heart of it all, this Pisces lunar eclipse is a portal for a kind of soul surrender and the closing out of a karmic cycle. So this is not about forcing clarity, forcing that door open. It's more about taking ownership of your life, yes, and your capacity as a co-creator, but staying open and curious and grounded and in alignment for your soul's expansion and journey. This is about allowing yourself to be reshaped and forged by grace. The universe is helping you to release what you don't need, even if you didn't realize it in the first place. Let go with love. Receive and stay open to that trust and guidance, and know that that next dream is already dreaming you. I'm sending you so much love this eclipse season. Until next time, be well.